Alright, so we're going to take a minute here and using a Wraith original sized offset rear. This is a stock replacement rear housing. We're going to use this as our example here, and the axle comes out of the box just like this, already partly assembled. We don't put all the screws in on the casing on the pinion side or on the cover side. You can do that yourself. But we wanted to make sure that we gave you an assembly instruction on these. This is very simple. The first thing you're going to do when you get your axles home is take off the two cap bolts here. There's a cap bolt on each side. We've taken this cover off already. And then you're going to take off the two bolts that are on the back cover that are in the center. So this one right here and that one right there. And we'll just drop these out here and so you can have a look at what's going on. Now these screws are not very big, so make sure that when you're assembling the diff, you're screwing your precision hardware here right into a precision threaded hole. This is all CNC machine stuff. And so make sure you don't over tighten them, because you are in aluminum here, and so, you know, if guys have got a big healthy arm, you have no problem stripping the threads out of these little tiny screws. If you need a replacement, they're a 256 screw, a 1/4 inch long. It's pretty easy to get at most hardware supply companies. So there's the inside of the A-13. Now, I wanted to highlight a couple of things here in the assembly. See this little silver bit right here? You can't really see it on this side, but there's just a hint of silver here. Obviously this doesn't mean anything if you have an actual silver, a complete silver unit. But these units are made with such precision that the tube cannot fit into the housing after it gets black anodized. Now black anodizing adds a couple of tenths of an inch per side. It's the smallest amount. It's a 0.0002. That's the amount of buildup that this anodize builds up on the aluminum. So we've got the tubes blacked, the center housing blacked, and the precision fit is so close that we actually have to machine the anodize off of the tube in order to fit these together. Okay, these are tight. You cannot get these out. Most of these we have to actually press fit at the shop before we do the initial assembly for packaging. So these are super tight, and if you see some silver in here on your black housings where the tube comes through, that's because we've had to cut the anodize off just to get the parts together. They're so tight. Now this assembly is really simple. You're going to take your first bearing and drop it right into the bottom here. The first bearing is going to go down into the pinion hole. There, we've got the bearing in there. Can't really see it, but there's a bearing in there. And then we're going to take our pinion shaft here and drop it in. Now, this is, we recommend, there's so many different kinds of grease out there. You know, our favorite one is the white lithium. We like it because it's thin, and up here in Canada sometimes we get into the cold weather and the thin grease doesn't slow down your motor and heat up your battery. So I mean, we like to use the thin grease, and a lot of people are using all kinds of different stuff, the green axial lube, and there's so many greases out there nowadays. So we've got the pinion in, and the next thing is to take your built differential and drop it right in from the rear. You'll notice that there's just a little bit of play in there between the tubes. The bearings sit in a cup inside the housing like that, and there we're ready to go on the pinion gear. That's just a thing of beauty. And there's just the smallest amount of play here between the tubes. We did this on purpose. This isn't for nothing. So make sure that you've got your front bearing here as well, so that your pinion gear is lined up. This is your opportunity to shim up your gears and make sure that your alignment is perfect. So in our case, if we hold the pinion right here, so it's tight against the housing, it's pulled this way, so it's tight against the housing bearings, and we can push this in. You can see right away if you're going to have play in your gears. In our case, there's nothing. The fit is designed right away so that you have absolutely no play. When everything's tight and it's pressed in place, you should have perfect gear alignment. And the reason we did that is because some of the helical cut HG gears that are available for these, they require an exact fit. If they don't have the exact alignment between the pinion and the crown gear, then the curve of the gear doesn't mate and you have a serious gear binding problem. So we've made these really exact. If you need to do any shimming, there's a little space between the bearings and the tube on each side. Just the tiniest amount of space. There's just the smallest amount of space in there, and you can use a 15mm shim in there and make that work. So that's an option if you need shimming. That's where you do it, is right there between the tubes. And then your last step, of course, is to take the housing cover, drop the housing cover back on. You'll also notice that all of this could have been done in the truck. All of it. Because the pinion cover never comes off. This entire thing can be done from the rear. So the last thing we're going to do is put our bearing in. Actually, the axle goes in first on these. So we'll drop the axle tube in there. Line that up with the locker. So we've got the locker lined up here with the axle. We're going to drop the back bearing on there. There we go. The last thing that's going to happen is the cover. So the bearing cover that you see right here will go on here to cover over the bearing at the very end, and you drop in the 2 screws the same way you see them right here. Drop the 2 screws back in, make sure nothing's binding, and away you go. That is the assembly for the GCM A-13 Metalheads. Very similar to our steel Metalheads for SCX that we used to make, no longer in production. But there was a couple of changes on these, so we wanted to highlight, specifically with the tab mounts, specifically with the precision here and the way that the truss is set up. So if you have any questions about your GCM last lockers installation or the A-13 aluminum Metalhead assembly or use or setup or any of that stuff, please feel free to contact GCM Racing, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. There you go.